So good afternoon, guys, and welcome to the Women of the West Indies show. If you are new here, I am Vinay Bass, and I am your host. I hope that you're all having a fantastic Sunday afternoon wherever you are, and that you're getting ready for a fantastic week ahead. So last week, I sat down with the incredible Kititian, educator, and philanthropist, Mistress Sandra York Gums, and this week we are heading back to Nevis, my neighbouring island here in Montserrat, for fun and inspiring conversation with the fantastic young politician, Honourable Jahnel Nisbett. How are you this afternoon, Jahnel?
I am great, Vinaya. How are you?
I am fantastic. And how are things over there in beautiful Nevis? I can literally see Nevis from where I am today in
The
the studio.
sunshine is out and it's a warm day, but it's a lovely day, perfect weather to be on the beach.
Yeah, absolutely. And I heard that there's a hurricane coming close to the region, possibly tomorrow. So I'm hoping that it goes its way and goes straight past us because we
Fingers
don't need
crossed.
that kind of drama right now. Yes, so guys, if you're just tuning in now, you are tuned into the Women of the West Indies show. I encourage you to go and grab a drink, get into a comfy seat, and join us for another fun-filled conversation of empowerment and sisterhood. Welcome to the WOW show. So, guys, if you're just tuning in now, you are tuned in to Women of the West Indies with me, your host, Vinay Bass. And this afternoon, I am joined by the beautiful Nevisian politician, Honourable Jahnel Nisbett. So, Jahnel, do we say Nevisian? I wasn't sure.
Yes, you say Nevision.
Good. So, I'm on the right track.
Yes.
So, yes, you hail from the beautiful island of Nevis. I like to ask my guests one thing about their island. So, can you tell me one unique thing about your island that many people may not be aware of?
I would start with that. The people are the nicest, but I think everyone is aware of that. So if I go with a fun thing that people might not be aware of, I would say we have over 40 varieties of mangoes here. And so we have an annual mango festival. It's actually coming up this weekend. It's a wonderful experience to celebrate best mangoes.
Wow. No pun intended, but wow, 40.
Over 40, actually. That's just the ones that can specifically pinpoint and label, but we know that there are many more. So
Are those endemic to Nevis, or is it just like
some would be, and some would probably be imported varieties as well. But the mangoes that go on Nevis are the absolute best. And even though you know that St. Kitts and Nevis are sister islands and we're only 2 miles apart, even our brothers and sisters on St. Kitts know that the mangoes in Nevis are they're just exceptional. It's a brand of its own.
wow, it's crazy to hear that because I recently found out that grapefruit is endemic to Barbados. Did you know that?
I did not know that. That's news to me.
Yeah, it was so funny. I was randomly watching the video and it came up. You know, when you see those videos on YouTube where they're telling you little bits about the islands, and it said that grapefruit originated in Barbados. I was like, what? So I Googled it, of course, and it's true.
Oh,
So
right.
is there a Nevis mango? Or what's your favorite mango?
There's a strong debate between the Amripoli and the Julie mango or the grafted mango. I'm team grafted. I'm team grafted mango, but it's a tough competition.
I have to say I'm team Julie because it's definitely not hairy mango for me because my teeth and hairy mango, we just can't get on. It's just too much work. Like I want to eat it, but at the same time afterwards, the torture and the torment of trying to get that mango out of my teeth, I don't know if it's worth it. But grafted is nice as well. But we could go.
No, but we call grafted and Julie. We interchange the name for those two.
Okay, cool. So yeah, it'll be interesting, guys, to find out what your favorite mango is. So if you want to drop that in the comments, but I can't even like begin to imagine 40 different varieties of mango. So guys, if you're ever in Nevis, so if you're in Nevis next week, make sure you go out and check out the mango festival.
Yeah.
So what are some of the things that you actually going off topic?
It's about I know, but it's about 3 to 4 days. It's from the 4th to the 7th. and you have different activities. So one of the days we will have a bar crawl on the beach where there are different beach bars, and they would be making mango fruit infused drinks. Another event is where there's a celebrity chef, and they would come in and they would prepare about a 4-course meal, mango inspired, of course, and different people can pay to dine in for that experience. There's another event where you're actually getting to do some cooking classes with this celebrity chef. And of course, the main feature event is For the Love of Mangoes. That's on Sunday. And you bring together chefs and restaurants from throughout the island, and they have their different booths, and everyone have mango infused food items. You have popsicles, you have the chicken and the mango sauces. It's
Mm.
just exceptional. There's entertainment. It's a cultural vibe, and it's everything mango and everything Nevis.
That's fantastic. I wish the ferry was still running so we can take a trip over to Nevis, but maybe next time.
Next
Yes,
year, we have a trip around that time. This is the 10th anniversary, but
absolutely.
we're getting better and bigger.
Also, this year is the 10th anniversary as well.
Anniversary, yes.
Interesting. That's fantastic. So, you've mentioned to me that you come from really humble beginnings. How would you describe your childhood in Nevis as the youngest child of four?
I think I had a pretty good childhood. As an adult, looking back, you see where you were wanting. You can see now where the holes were, and that you were, in a sense, in the lower economic status. But as a child, I didn't feel like I was lacking anything. There was love in my home. We're from the generation where we went outside in the afternoon and we played, friends, etc. Grew up in a small wooden house with siblings and my mother, but always made sure we were fed, we were clean, and we had that experience of understanding the value of working hard to get to where you need to be.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the things about when you're a child growing up. I think unless someone comes and tells you that you are poor,
Right.
you really just run with it, right? Because I will say the same thing about my upbringing. It's only when I look back, like you said, you feel like, oh well, maybe we weren't necessarily upper class or middle class, but we had enough. And I think
Yeah.
that sometimes people try and go overboard where maybe you can provide all these materialistic things, but then you may not have that love and that connection as well. So I guess, like, how do you define a rich lifestyle? Is it because it's monetary or is it because of all the other attributes that come with it? But
I
your
think
childhood was, sorry.
Oh, I was just jumping in there. Like, I think when you talk about rich lifestyle, for me, it's just about having options. That's my concept of rich, having the option to relax today, having the option to do something nice for yourself or the ones you love. General, that's my concept and general happiness.
Mhm. Absolutely. But your childhood was also interesting because you were actually born in Anguilla and raised in Negus until you were about 12, after which you returned to Anguilla to complete secondary school. So what was that period in your life like? What was that transition like, from growing up in Nevis, even though being fully aware that you were from Anguilla, and then returning to Anguilla?
Well, St. Kitts and Nevis and Anguilla used to be one country at one point in time. So you still had that connection of people. So my parents, one from St. Kitts, one from Nevis, would have met in Anguilla. And I so happened to be born in Anguilla. But a few months later, I was back in Nevis. Nevis has always been the home I've known. And so growing up here was just normal. It was usual. I was Nevisian. My mother is Nevisian. My siblings are Nevisian. So I operated on that with the background knowledge that yes, I was born in Anguilla. When we moved back there when I was 12, I've always been a bit of a nomadic spirit in a sense. So I just saw it as, well, it's an opportunity to rebrand and start over. And, it's just a whole new experience that I get to go into. And so that's exactly what I did when I went to Angola. Just
So let's talk
blend
about
in.
this whole idea of rebranding. What does a 12-year-old know about an opportunity to rebrand? What does that mean to you?
I know it's such a strange thing to say, but I distinctly remember having that thought because my mother gave me the option. of whether, yeah, this is something I wanted to do. Like, do you want to move to Anguilla? And I was like, yeah, you just get to go and start over in the new place. Like, there's nothing wrong with here, but it's just an opportunity to meet new people with a complete blank slate. That's always just something so appealing to me, even back then as a child. And I just jumped in and I went with it.
I know because we met through both working with the OCS. And one thing I've always admired about you is your love for travel. So I think
Yeah.
there's just like you mentioned that there's this nomadic side of you anyway. So I think that that was probably instilled from your early childhood, and it was just something that you embrace, which must mean that you're also very adaptable. Would that be true?
Yes, yes. I'm always willing to just try something new in general. So if it's not something that's going to kill me sometimes it might kill me because I might skydive as well. So it might be risky sometimes. But generally I'm open to new experiences and exploring and building on my general knowledge of life and experiences.
Absolutely. And it makes you a well-rounded individual as well. But after living in Anguilla for some time, you eventually returned to Nevis. Um, what is it about Nevis that holds such a special place in your heart, especially because you have dual nationalities? So some would say, how did you in the end decide to spend your adult life in Nevis as opposed to Anguilla?
Well, first thing, I don't actually have dual nationality. I'm only
Oh,
a
you
national
don't?
citizen, Nevis, actually. British. You're from Montserrat, so the British laws, and if your parents are from a place, you don't automatically get citizenship like that. So I'm only a citizen of Saint Kitts and Nevis, which
So
I'm
how does
good.
it work? Because isn't one of your parents from Anguilla?
No,
So how did they?
no.
Oh,
One is
okay.
from Saint Kitts and one is from Nevis. They just happen to have met in Anguilla.
Okay, okay,
Yeah.
okay.
But I went to sixth form in Anguilla, all through sixth form. I finished, I started working for a year. And then I actually came back to Nevis on a Christmas vacation. And I just felt homesick. I literally just felt like this is where I want to be. I'm ready to be back here now. I'm out of school, I'm working. I need to be back in this place. And so sad, went back to Anguilla, tendered my resignation, and I was back home within a month.
So were you when you were living in Anguilla, were you back and forth to Nevis all the time anyway? Or was
No,
it literally you spent all your years in Anguilla over that period and then that just this one trip brought you back to Nevis?
I was able to come back to Nevis maybe about 3 times during the time I was in Angola. I wasn't wealthy, as I mentioned. So travel was not something that you could just do when you felt like it. So as I started working, I was able to earn money to be able to say, let me go to vacation in Nevis now. And that's when I really realized that I was seriously missing home, and it was calling my name, and I answered the call.
Fantastic. So you mentioned that you stayed in Anguilla up until sixth form and then you were working at the time as well.
Yeah.
So how did you make that transition from sixth form to college? Because I know that no one in your immediate family had attended college, and you went on to become a qualified teacher. So tell me a little bit about that process and how it worked out for you.
So yeah, I would have finished sixth form in Anguilla. I always knew that I didn't necessarily want to be. I wanted to pursue further education. It was something in me that it's just something I wanted to satisfy that own personal desire. But I also know I didn't have the funding necessarily to take or want to take a loan out per se to continue that education. So came up with a strategy, started some UE courses online, decided that I'll explore, see where I could possibly find scholarships, etc., and work in the meantime. So worked for a few years, and then I was able to, because of the system that we have here, I was working as a teacher. When you're in the service for a number of years, you have the opportunity to get study leave with some assistance from the government. So that was really what enabled me to go to school without getting in debt as well, because that's something that was very important to me, that I didn't necessarily go and take a big loan and then you're stuck with that for 10 years in the future. So that enabled me to be able to go to school in Trinidad and fund it out of pocket and with what savings I would have already had.
Okay, so what did you study in Trinidad?
In Trinidad, I studied history and anthropology.
Okay. So, at the top of the question I asked you, I mentioned that so none of your immediate family members, sorry, had attended college. What was it that was really pushing you to break that cycle?
Well, yeah, so my mother, my siblings, I'm the youngest, I would have been the first one. I think it's always just been a drive to be better than where I started. And then if I can advance further, then I can also advance those who I love, especially my mother. I can get the necessary education and consequently better job to be able to give her a more comfortable life, because I saw how hard she worked to just ensure that we weren't lacking anything essential in our life. We always had food, you always clean, you always get to go to the school activities, etc. And I think I wanted to just be able to show that the investment was worth it, in a sense. Even my older siblings would have had to make sacrifices, like especially my eldest brother and sister. Sometimes in primary school, they may have to stay home from school if there's no babysitter available for me or something. And you just want to be able to show that those sacrifices weren't in vain.
So that's interesting, because in a way, being the youngest also contributed to this as well,
Yeah.
because you didn't have to be one of the
Right.
eldest to stay at home and maybe make more sacrifices. And sometimes people take that for granted, that as children, based on when you're born, that could be at a disadvantage for you or an advantage. So that's an interesting point. But guys, I'm going to take a little break and we'll be right back after this. So, guys, if you're just joining us now, you are tuned into the WOW Show with yours truly, Vinay Bass. This afternoon, I am sitting down with the fabulous WOW woman, Honorable Jahnel Nisbett. And so far, we've been talking about mangoes. We've been talking about her childhood, growing up between Nevis and Anguilla, and also being the first person in her immediate family to attend college. So, Jahnel, you were teaching history, social studies, English, and literature at the secondary school level. And that must have been extremely fulfilling. Well, what motivated you to step away from teaching to become the youngest executive director of the Nevis Historical and Conservation Society, which is also the reason or the way that we met?
Yes.
So, what made you step away from teaching?
Okay. So I love teaching. I absolutely love teaching. To this day, I would tell you that I'm still so passionate about teaching. And any teacher would let you know that once a teacher, always a teacher. Your students are always reaching out for you for things. Nevertheless, somebody might have questions on their essays when they're in university. You're still going to be a teacher. But I think when the opportunity presented itself as well to be the executive director of the Historical and Conservation Society, I saw it as an opportunity again to just expand my own knowledge base, see how I can utilize the background and my study in history to be able to expand the Historical and Conservation Society here in Nevis, make it more relevant to the people of the island and individuals with African heritage, especially because, there's a large movement, in a sense, to decolonize some of the history that we have, even the ones we celebrate here in the region. So I thought that was a fantastic opportunity. And I knew that teaching would always be a part of me, but you have to always be willing to explore different avenues and see how you can contribute in different ways to national and personal development.
So do you think that your love of history contributes to your patriotism and why you love your island so much?
I think I love both. I'm not sure that one necessarily informs the other. I'm pretty certain if I didn't love history, I would still love Nevis. But
That's
I
true.
think they're just existing together, coexisting beautifully, and I use my love of history to be able to learn more about Nevis and embrace another side of Nevis that some people might not be exploring regularly. You know, different people focus on the culture, some might focus on the food, some have a love for the history. So I just delve into different aspects.
So how do you think that we can make, because I'm someone who absolutely loves history as well, which is something I'm quite obsessed with here, here in Munster, if I'm honest. But what do you think that we need to do to get more young people excited about history and culture, especially with the move towards, technology and innovation? What do you think that we can do to make more young people interested in the history of where they come from?
I think we have to start making those connections. And I think one of the things I try to do in my classroom, sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't, was explain the concept of history as I see it, especially how we study it. I think a lot of people look at it and they feel fear because, oh my God, I can't remember those dates and all those events. But I try to explain to my students it's not so much about memorizing a set of facts from a textbook, it's about investigating different sources of information, reading, understanding, and being able to interpret that information. You might have a different perspective of what may have happened. You have to look at the different sources of information and think about, would their perspective be a biased perspective that they're telling the story from? So the concept of there is no right or wrong answer in history per se is something that I try to teach a lot because I don't think it's readily understood. And so I think you can inspire with that sense. You can make connections to show how this historical period event informed the way we live now. Make those linkages for them to see it, hope and pray sometimes. I think we also need to stop forcing it because it's in the nature of the youth to rebel against anything that you say you have to do. So it needs to
Mhm.
be an option that is celebrated and showcased, but not forced.
Yeah, and I think it's also understanding that history is really just evolution. Because when I started to learn more about the history of the island, you can see the different stages and phases of the island, but also understanding that we're creating history every day. So even this conversation we're having now is in 2 years' time or even from tomorrow going to be history. But I
When
think
you're out
sometimes
there,
when you, because especially when I was in the UK, for example, all I heard about in history was about World War I and World War II. And I think most of the times, even here in the region, when you think about history, I think most young people in their minds, especially as Black people, when we think of history, we think of it being a negative period or a negative time in our life because there's always that association to slavery and stuff like that. So I think it's just making people understand that it's so much more than just slavery or degradation or a difficult time in our life, that history is also about the evolution of mankind and how we've gone through all of these different phases to get to the point where we are now. So
you
hopefully,
know that we relate on the love of history, definitely.
yeah. Because it's so interesting to me. I've always been fascinated with it. So yeah, that's why we ended up on a heritage
Honestly,
a
always
heritage board.
connected.
Absolutely. So you've received quite a few accolades in Nevis. And speaking of the youth as well, you created this event called Nice, which was a career event for the youth. So why did you decide to create that?
Okay, so remember I just told you about the fact that once a teacher, always a teacher. So that idea for that program was actually the idea of one of my former students. So she reached out to me. She wasn't on Ireland at the time. She was overseas studying. She's like, I have this idea. I've had this experience here at university where we're exposed to different careers, etc. So it's something that I want to see implemented in Nevis. But she's like, I need somebody on the ground who I can trust and who can help me execute it on the ground while I have to organize it from university. And I'm a busybody, so and I can't say no to my students when they have something that they're passionate about. So yeah, Gabriella Brantley, so she would have been the one who pitched the idea, and I was just happy to come on board and support her in any way that I can. We celebrated the third year this year, and it's her baby. I'm the supporting cast, and I'm happy to be able to provide that support to her and expose students in Nevis in general.
Yeah, and I know that because especially when I was in the UK as well, it was something that was almost par for course, especially when you're leaving like college and going over
Yes.
to university. Career fairs was just something that was always available. I'm actually hosting a careers event on Monday here on the
Oh.
island myself, a higher education evening, because I think it's important to expose the youth to different careers at a very early age so that they can see what's out there, but also
Mhm.
to open up their minds to the different options that are available to them. But you
Right.
also received the Nevis Island Administration Youth Impact Award in 2020. Is there a particular project or achievement you're especially proud of that contributed to that recognition?
That I was actually awarded in the area of patriotism. So I think that was based on my just long-standing history of contributions in different areas, from the community cleanups to volunteerism, starting different campaigns such as a voter education awareness campaign. They all kind of just culminated and came together to be able to highlight that this person is someone that truly values patriotism and pushes it, embodies it in a lot of different ways. From that award, a number of us were selected to be able to pilot a project, however, with some funding to showcase that we are the Youth Impact 12 awardees. And from that, I would have actually selected Makajumbi because I'm passionate about the cultural aspect. I just love the Makajumbi as a cultural art form. And I realized that a lot of the dancers were older and they were fading in a sense. They didn't have many. So I would have piloted a small group of about 12 children to create the next generation of Makajambis. And I thought that went great. We still have a number of them who are actively involved. They'll be on the road for Culturama this year. And I think that was just a successful culmination of that award. But I continue to contribute in a patriotic way every
Mhm.
day.
So, for those who may not be familiar and those who are listening who may not be from the Caribbean, what is Makajumbi?
Makajumbi is basically walking on stilts or some very tall sticks if you're not from the Caribbean. So it's just a 4 feet, maybe depends on your skill level, 4 feet, 5 feet high, and you're walking on those as your legs.
Yeah, and as I was saying to you earlier, I saw a video on your Instagram. So if you're not following Jahnel, what's your Instagram handle again? If they really want to
Oh,
see it,
what is my Instagram handle? I think if you look for Jahnel Nisbett, you can
Nisbet.
find me.
Yeah,
It might be
I think
Jahnel
it might have a number at the end.
Jahnel 869, I think, yes. That's
Yeah.
our area code.
So if you want to know what the Makajumbi looks like, she recorded a video this week where they were training someone on how to get on the stilts, and I have to say I felt like I was up on the stilts myself because I still can't, like, for some reason, like my brain and my legs are never in coordination, which is why I've never been into dance. So I can only imagine what must go through your mind. Like, how do you relax yourself enough to just walk on the stilts? Because I saw you on the stilts yourself. So what do you have to say to yourself mentally to be able to get up there and do it?
I listen, I've fallen before. I've fallen in the streets of Nevis for a cultural armor during the cultural parade. That was back in about 2013, though, so everybody didn't have their cell phones. So I don't think I've never seen it recorded anywhere. But I fell on the road. So after you get that first fall, I think you're able to relax now and say, "Oh wow, that didn't kill me. It's just a bruise."
What
So
doesn't
I
kill
think
you make you make you what doesn't kill you make you stronger on the stilts.
I think the fear is one of the main things that hinders you. So once you get that fall out of the way, because that's the main fear, you're good.
So does the fall have to be in public or is it just any fall?
Hopefully private, but mine happened that first fall. That's the only time I actually fell off of them, but that fall was in public.
Wow. Because I think that you are correct though, because I think that's the main thing that's going through your mind that you're gonna fall. And I guess it's like maybe like riding a bike. Like once you get over the fact that yes, you
Yeah.
are gonna fall and you've fallen, then the rest is just history. It's interesting that you've only fallen once because I can see myself falling a lot of times.
You're fine, because when you're learning, somebody's holding you, you're getting that support.
Interesting. So you also participated in the US Embassy Women in Politics Leadership Institute program, which must have been a pivotal experience for you. What was that what sparked your interest in politics?
I believe that I it's always such an interesting question for me with politics. I have a passion for leadership and I'm interested in leadership in a sense and good governance and good leadership. And so that just always somehow translated to an interest in politics because politics is the pathway for whoever to get into, unless we go into an autocratic state or something. Politics is the way that we identify our leaders. And so you have to take an interest in that process as well if you're interested in good leadership and governance. So it's never necessarily been like, yeah, such a political I have such a political interest, but that interest for seeing good governance has always been there. And so I decided to participate in the course when I saw the opportunity to sign up. And it was a very competitive process, but I was luckily selected as one of the individuals to participate from across the region. And it was just a really insightful experience. I tend to try as much as I can. That's a common theme in this conversation to get different experiences, different sources of knowledge so that I'm better informed. When I open my mouth, I like to know what I'm saying in general rather than just talking for the sake of talking.
Mhm. So what would you say, after all of your experiences and obviously your interest in leadership, what makes a good leader?
I think that what makes a good leader is someone who wants to do for others, not just have the title of leader. So it's almost a sense that you're leading as service rather than leading for self.
Yeah, so leading to give back rather than leading for ego or for self-recognition.
Yes.
Awesome. So when you were called to serve as a senator in Nevis, in the Nevis Island Assembly in 2022, what was going
Yes.
through your mind? Was that the formal recognition of you as a leader?
I think I've always been recognized as a leader in some capacity. You just sometimes you have the individuals who come out and take the reins in different groups and organization. And if I want to see something done, sometimes I'm going to do it and put myself forward to do it. So when I was selected for that position of senator, I think what was going through my mind is, okay, somebody has to do it, and I think I am a competent person to be able to pick up the mantle. I'm a passionate advocate for more women in leadership, more young people in leadership. So if the opportunity is now presented to me as a young person and a woman to tick both of those boxes so that we're represented in that space, it would be hypocritical in a sense for me to say, no, 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 I don't want it. Whereas I'm pushing for this to happen. Someone has to step up. It's a sacrifice. Being in the public space, it's challenging on your personal life, your mental health, everything. But somebody has to do it. And I think I have the mental fortitude and to be able to do it. And so I said, yeah, I'm going to do this.
Awesome. And for those who may not be aware, because we don't have the role of a senator here in Montserrat, what is the role of a senator in the Nevis Island Assembly?
Well, In my case, I'm a senator as well as a minister. So because I'm a senator on the government side, um, the limited number of elected seats we have, the implication is generally that the senators who are nominated into the positions are also made ministers as well, so that you can help to support and take on some of the different portfolios in government. So that just there's better distribution of workload rather than it being placed on just the three elected individuals. So we're simply nominated members, but we serve in the same capacity as ministers. We also have the option to have senators on the opposition benches. Currently, we don't have any because of the setup of the opposition. But if there was a senator on the opposition benches, their role would be to come to the assembly, debate the bills, advocate for their views on what should happen in Nevis, and make their voice heard.
Awesome. Thank you so much for an enlightening conversation so far. But guys, we're going to take a quick break and be right back in a few seconds. So, guys, if you are still rocking with us, thank you so much for tuning in to the WOW Show. I'm your host, Vinaya Bass, and this afternoon I am sitting down with the beautiful Nevision, Honorable Jahnel Nisbett. And in true WOW woman style, she's been telling us all about her fantastic accolades, her patriotism, and also her unconventional journey into politics. So now we're going to jump into a little bit about the life of a young female politician. So as you mentioned just now, before we took a break, you said that you started off as a senator, and you were later appointed, not elected, into the role of Minister of Health, Gender Affairs, and Social Empowerment. So, can you tell us how that opportunity came about and how it feels to take on such a significant ministry so early in your political career?
Right. So as I mentioned, the appointment as a senator and the appointment as a minister happened more or less simultaneously. So it was one with the other. As I became a senator, I became eligible to have ministerial responsibilities, and that happened right away. So it's definitely people-centered portfolio: health, gender affairs, social empowerment, which includes our social services and community development. So it's a demanding portfolio in terms of something like healthcare. It's a need for the entire population. Social services, you have to support the entire population. So it's a huge responsibility, but I think I came into the role open to being able to listen first from the technocrats who are there. They've been there for years sometimes, to provide information, all the technical knowledge, while coming in with a fresh perspective, someone who hasn't been in that role, because sometimes you need someone from the outside with a different viewpoint to be able to reshape some of the programs that we have and try to tailor them. And one of my main goals is to be able to reach those who need the help the most.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think, are you still there? Hello?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think the interesting thing about this, and I had another young politician on the show, Honorable Quincy Gums Marie from Anguilla, who you
Yeah,
may
I
or
can
may not
remember.
know.
We're still together.
Yeah. So Quincy's, she started off as a parliamentary secretary, and then she went on to become the Minister of Agriculture. So one of the things I think people always think is, when you take on a role, like when you take on a ministerial role over a specific ministry, that you should have some background, say in health, or some background in agriculture. So what would you say were some of the obstacles you faced initially when you took over that role? Obviously, having what first not being a minister before, and also taking over such a large ministry and such an important ministry without having a background in health.
Yeah, there's that perception, and it's not wrong or right necessarily, but because of the limited pool of individuals that you're selecting from as well, you will never have, there are only 5 seats to possibly have a maximum of 5 ministers and maybe 2 senators, 2, 3 senators. So you might never have someone who have the technical expertise in every single ministry area. What you need are people who are able to learn and listen and critically think. You don't necessarily need to be the technical person. We are surrounded by technical people. We have to learn as leaders to tap into our resource pool. They're there, they're educated, they study this, so we can, the way I approach it is I'm informed by their experience and expertise, and then we use that information now to shape policies to make those decisions. This is not a one man or one woman army. And I really appreciate the support of my team, and that's how we're able to push forward and get the job done.
So we were speaking about leadership at the top of the conversation. What have you learned about leadership or even your leadership style since you've taken over a whole ministry? Because obviously in the past, you were a leader, someone who saw something that needed to be done and you went out and you rectified it. But then now you're managing a whole ministry, which means that you probably have hundreds of employees underneath you. So how has your view of leadership changed or shifted since then?
Right. So my view of leadership is dynamic. So it really depends. It's fluid based on the situation. But I've always been a go getter, do it myself type of person, really. But in this role, you are we still connected?
Hello? Yeah, I think we're having some connections. Just start again there. Hello? You there? So, guys, we're just having some connectivity issues. Just bear with us. Are you back? Can you hear me? Just bear with us one moment, guys, as we try to rectify these connection issues. Let me just try and message Jahnel. Hello? So just bear with us, guys. I think she's having some connectivity issues.
My perspective on leadership has always been I want it done. Sometimes I go get it done by myself. I get in the mud, do what needs to be done. But I think in this position, I realize I simply cannot be actively involved in every aspect. I still try my best to be as active and hands on in the areas that I can be, but you have to surrender that trust and the ability to delegate to your team. So you have to trust your team and be able to delegate with them. And one of the things I think one of my shortcomings may have been the follow up, because I'm such a person where, okay, if I say I'm going to do it, I try to just do it and get it done. I don't necessarily have that practice of feeling the need to follow up with someone that says they're going to get something done. But sometimes it's a required thing because everyone's doing so many different things. So that's one of the additions to my leadership style that I'm working on. Remembering to, yeah, you have to drop in those reminders and those follow-ups sometimes just to make sure that everybody is on the ball.
And it's also a balancing act as well, right? Because you don't want to be someone who's following up all the time and then you're seen as a micromanager. But at the same time, you don't want to not follow up and then assume that it's been done so later find out that it hasn't been done.
Yes,
So
exactly. I hate
striking the right
micromanaging.
balance. Yeah.
It's not in my nature to micromanage, but sometimes it's a requirement, and you just have to do what you have to do to get the job done.
So, have you also faced any skepticism because of your age or your gender?
Well, I'm sure those things would inform different individuals. They would have their queries. I'm a very inconsiderate
So, guys, just bear with us. We're experiencing a few technical difficulties this afternoon. But I'll just ask the question again because we had a little bit of a dropout there. So, have you faced any skepticism regarding your age and gender as a politician?
I am certain that both of those factors would influence some people's skepticism. I haven't had any brought to me directly in a sense, but I was highlighting that I'm a inconspicuous person in a sense. I do a lot, but there's still a lot of people who didn't know who I was. So I kind of just, for some people, I just kind of dropped out of the sky into this public role because I kept to myself a lot. So I'm quiet by nature. So when you're quiet, people don't really know what to think. So based on my quiet type demeanor, you would have some individuals who would question whether or not I'm the leader or someone's leading me and I'm just a face, etc. But I roll with the punches and I'm just letting time tell the tale. What is the historical saying? History will absolve me. So I'm letting my record show for itself. I'm not really deterred by any skepticism, which I don't think has been a prominent feature, at least not that I've heard. But I'm sure some people are skeptical. But I'm doing what I have to do, and it's not really influencing my work in any way.
So, what would you say to a young person looking at you and, aspiring to be like you one day, especially a young female? What gives you this courage and this gumption and this determination to just push forward with whatever you believe in?
For me, one of the things I always remind myself, when imposter syndrome starts trying to creep in, it's like there's been people better and worse than me doing this job centuries, decades before us. There is no possible world where I can think that I'm not good enough to do this. I think based on your own experiences, you prepare yourself and you give it your best. You just have to know that your best is good enough. You have to try, otherwise, it makes no sense aspiring to something if you're not willing to try and understand that sometimes you might fail, but you just have to get back up and brush off, refresh, and keep going again. Accept the challenge, and if you need to get more education, need to get more skill sets, more information, more support, you do what you need to do to be able to tackle the next task. So for young girls, anyone looking up to me and deciding that this is what they want to do, I say just prepare yourself in such a way. Don't target this as the goal necessarily. Just prepare yourself. Always be a person that's willing to learn, open to new experiences, always willing to do what needs to be done to get the job done. And these opportunities tend to find you rather than you having to go in search of them.
So speaking of young people and the next generation, at the recent ICPD 30 Global Youth Dialogue in Benin, you were the only parliamentarian from the Caribbean selected to participate. How has this experience influenced your vision for empowering the young people in Nevis? And first of all, how did that opportunity come about for you?
That opportunity came about, I think, I may have made an influence somewhere at one of the previous conferences.